finally, the main event of the podcast. I know we've done mostly news this week, but to reiterate what I said at the beginning of the show, we, at the end of last week, so we the people, that we were interested, or more specifically, you were interested, because you asked me to find out, that who were the Storytime with Dutch Mantell listeners also listening to in the wrestling sphere. You wanted to know exactly who they were listening to, who were their favourite podcasts, and who were not.
How many responses did we get?
Well, I thought it was going to get a few dozen. We got probably about 430, which is... Did people email you as well and tell you?
A few.
Yeah, I got quite a lot.
But they went to your spot, not to mine.
Oh, okay then. So yeah, I got quite a lot of emails as well. But
most of the people I got were all anti-James.
Yeah. No, I don't blame them.
I agreed with them.
Yeah, get a new co-host for God's sake. And there's a few different things I want to actually bring. So I actually got my editor Chris to do it for me this time, because when I had to go through the comments of the community board last time on YouTube, by the way, I actually asked on the community board on Storytime with Dutch Mantell YouTube channel, and that's where we got all these responses. It's a great way to get sort of news out, really, for the channel and everything. And I said, Chris, look, I can't be bothered this time, because it took me hours and hours to do the one 3 weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, when we did the greatest wrestlers never to hold a world title. I thought it took me like an hour. It took me like 4 or 5. It was ridiculous how long I was there trying to tally up. So I said, Chris, you do it. I can't be asked. So he did it, and he apparently couldn't be bothered to get an A4 piece of paper to write all these down, because he sent me a photo, and Chris put this in now, a photo of his little desk with the laptop and about 30 yellow Post-it notes everywhere on the desk trying to write down everything. So he sent him through, and he has collated a list of the most loved and the least loved.
And what was his name?
Chris.
Chris, you did a great job.
Yes, well done, boy.
I'll put you over, Chris. James won't, but I will.
Oh God, no. He's the boy to me. Got to keep the workers down. Anyway, a couple of things. Storytime with Dutch Mantell is disqualified from because we would have come first, because we are Storytime with Dutch Mantell. So
we do a Tony Khan. We'd say no, we came in first. Whatever the top number is, we would come in about 10 above that.
Yeah, the turnstile number for us was about 10 better than the actual number one. Similarly, WSI and quite a few people actually said Franchise University with Shane Douglas, even though it's only been out for 3 weeks. Also said that as well, which is very kind of you all, but they're disqualified as well. So anything associated with me, very much this podcast as well, is disqualified because, for obvious reasons, it's a bias. So we also specifically mentioned podcasts, but a few people here and there also mentioned other YouTube channels as well. So, having said all that, shall we get to, because the worst is always the most fun list. Should we get to the best? So, oh my God, how many pages have you written, for goodness sake? Should we do the one mentionees first, or should we start at like 4 or something so we don't burn ourselves out here?
Well, what was number 1?
Oh no! We're gonna go one mention, and then we're gonna go upwards. We have to save number 1.
Oh, okay.
Okay then. So
start wherever.
Okay. One person mentioned the following: Sean Ross Sapp, Vince Russo. One person mentioned Vince Russo. There's some people I've never heard of before: Stephen Larson, John McAdam, Sean Goodwin, Monty and the Pharaoh, Swerve Strickland, Matt Hardy only got one vote. Blue Meanie, you should check out Blue Meanies because he's a top man. Dave Meltzer, one person said. Colt Cabana, one person said, which is really surprising considering how long he's been doing it. Kevin Sullivan, OSW, Stick to Wrestling, Austin Idol. I'm pretty sure he hasn't had a podcast in years. Roddy Piper, he's been dead 8 years, and someone said him.
No kidding.
Hannibal, so there must be someone missing a chromosome out there to say Hannibal. Wrestle Talk, Corey Graves. One person said Corey Graves. Kevin Dagger, never heard of him. Dr. Lucha Libre, never heard of it. Wrestling Days, never heard of it. Barstool Wrestling, and Wrestling Soup, which I've never heard of either. So they were all the people who got mentioned once. The people who got mentioned twice: Don Morocco. We haven't done a podcast, Don and I, in 2 years, or a year and a half at least. Reliving the War. which is a YouTube channel, actually, not a podcast, but that's very good, and the guy's cool dude as well. JD from NY, that's rubbish as bar, I think. Honky Tonk Man, I didn't realise he had a podcast, if he does have one. Bucking the Territories, Dr. Tom Pritchard, I didn't realise he had one. Brian Solomon, Stevie Ray, Busted Open Radio, that one that you mentioned recently.
But they haven't done a podcast in how long?
No, they still do the radio shows, they just don't update the YouTube channel.
Oh, okay.
Chris Jericho. Only 2 people said Chris Jericho, of all people. Can you believe? Road Dog.
And he's got 1 million followers on his Twitter account.
Yeah.
But
only 2 people said him. Road Dog. Only 2 people said Gangrel and Brian Alvarez. Now, I've got to go backwards here. Bear with me. People who got 3 mentions. Rob Van Dam, Stevie Richards, who doesn't actually have a podcast per se. He's got a YouTube channel, but 3 people mention him. Raven, that I can't believe still got a podcast, but he has. Lapsed Fan, Wrestle Me, What Culture, Chris Van Vliet, which isn't sort of a podcast, maybe. Wrestling Bios.
Chris who, but Van Fleet.
Yeah, Chris Van Vliet.
Who in the hell is he?
Oh, I think he's, I don't know what.
He's a writer, isn't he?
No. He's he does similar. Well, say he does similar to me. I do similar to him because he started first with the main channel. He interviews people. The last 3 that I mentioned there, the last 3 may not actually be podcasts, but it's good YouTube content. And Simon Miller from What Culture is well liked specifically. Now, 4 likes for Cultaholic, Ted DiBiase's podcast, and Francine's podcast, who's the only female or the only lady on the list. Now, let's get to the meat of the matter here.
I think there is another female, whether she does a podcast or not. What is her name? She was on...
She ain't on this list. Renee Paquette does one. Not a single person mentioned it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, 5 mentions for Stone Cold Steve Austin, even though he hasn't done a podcast in years. 6 mentions for Kurt Angle and Ric Flair. Now, Ric Flair hasn't really done a podcast in ages, really, either. 7 mentions for a friend of the show, Ron Fuller, and Solomonster. Now, number 9. Or 9
Solo, is it Solo Monster? Who does that?
I don't know what his name is. Just Solomonster speaks.
Is he a wrestler?
I think he's just a fan who talks on wrestling.
Okay.
And now we're getting to the good stuff now. So, 9 mentions for Jake Roberts.
Ask me how many of those podcasts I've listened to.
How many?
0.
Go
ahead.
9 mentions for
Jake the Snake. I'd like to hear Jake's, though.
He might be featuring in the worst of as well. And Booker T for 9 mentions. Now, also for 9 mentions, Tony Schiavone. Now, from here on out, I'm going to start giving reasons or even a quote. So this is an amalgamation of all the reasons given for why they like the pod. Tony Schiavone's was rather muted. It's all right. But people listen to it. And Todd Edwards here has said Tony and Conrad have good chemistry.
You say muted? Muted?
Yeah, muted praise. So it's all right.
Toned down.
Okay. Yeah. Now we're going to get into the big boys now. 12 mentions.
Are we in the big boys?
No, we had to disqualify ourselves from it because we were tops otherwise.
Well, okay. I got it.
Excuse me. Briscoe and Bradshaw. 12 mentions. It seems that Briscoe is more like than Bradshaw on it. but everyone has love for Briscoe.
I think John, he's being typical John, and he'll make you mad at him. Because I think he's a heel on that show. John will not miss an opportunity to be a good heel. But he's hilarious. He's really funny, I think, and I'd listen to him.
Do you know, that's probably the only podcast that's like strictly interviewing that I will listen to, because I've interviewed Jerry. I've talked to John, but not really have talked to John, but he's always been he's mentioned me on his podcast a couple of times. He's been very, very kind, so hopefully we can get one or both of them on one day. Number 13, a fairly new one, Rene Dupree, with 13 mentions. Not overly analytical, but funny, is the general consensus on his podcast.
He's French-Canadian, right?
He is.
I met him in WWE.
Did you?
I'd never known him to have a sense of humor, to tell you the truth. He was just there. Nice guy. He was always treated me fine, but I don't know if I'd want to listen to him.
Well, it's all right. No one's forcing you to. Now, next on the list, Mick Foley with 15 likes or mentions, essentially. It says, good, but can avoid juicy topics.
What does that
Mick.
mean?
How do you mean?
He's good when he avoids juicy topics.
Yeah, he is good, but he can avoid juicy topics. So the real, more controversial stuff he will dance around.
Oh, he won't say one way or the other.
He might be a bit of a fence sitter. Next, with 18 mentions, Jeff Jarrett, Arn Anderson, and Bruce Pritchard all tying and typically rated as good.
Mm-hmm.
No one liked raving over them, but good and listenable. A lot of people have actually said, especially with Bruce Pritchard's, is that before he went to WWE, it was one of the best shows out there. And ever since he went back to WWE, he's probably got far less time.
Now, he is muted, but he can't say things.
Mm-hmm.
Because WWE and now Endeavor, he may even cancel his whole. He still does a podcast, correct?
He does, yeah.
Okay.
But apparently since he went back to WWE in 2019, 2020, whenever it was, the shows have fallen, maybe not fallen off a cliff, but nowhere near as good.
You've told me he would do 3-hour podcasts.
And the rest. 3-day podcasts sometimes. Yeah, some of them, there must have been tickling 5 hours.
Who in the hell could listen to a podcast? I know you only listen for a part of it, but hell, I couldn't sit and watch anything for 5 hours.
Mm-hmm. I
don't care. So
I can't be surrounded by my loved ones for 5 hours. I have to tell them to leave the house or something, or just go away. You know what I mean?
Yeah, get out. Damn it, leave.
Next on the list, 19 positive mentions for Jim Ross. Good knowledge and paints a good picture.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Next one.
But I couldn't listen to Jim Ross, though.
Why not?
Well, I've been around him so much. And I know the way he talks. I know his frequencies. And like my mind would go back where I first met him in Shreveport, Louisiana. And you never got a straight answer from Jim when I'm in Mid-South or in WCW, really. You never got that straight answer because he's a political guy and he knows what he can say and what he can't say. So if you go to him for an answer, you'll get an answer, but you get an answer that's so toned down, you don't know what the answer is. So that's to protect him. And I don't blame him.
Is Jim Ross a bit frustrating in that sense that if he's hired by someone, he always toes the company line? I mean, maybe he has, that's why he's been hired for 50 years. If I hire somebody, I want them to be an extension of me and believe the way I do. I don't blame him, but you won't get possibly you could get a straight answer. If he finally said, "Listen, it don't look good for you," or whatever, or say, "Are they going to use me? Or are they going to put me low down on the card or whatever?" And he would probably tell you that. So, and then you have to deal with it. What wouldn't you talk to you about then? What would you, if you asked him something that you knew you won't get a straight answer from? What would you ask him?
Okay, say a guy comes in. And the earlier WCW group, you were paid, I was, by appearance till I finally got it down to a straight number every week. And I'd want to know, hey, how many shots I got next month? And he would say, not many, or you're booked all month. So when I brought that up, when they put it at a straight number, guess what happened? I was booked everywhere because my number, whatever it was, instead of paying me by individual events, and this number wouldn't change no matter if they used me one time or 10 times, I still made the same amount. So therefore, let's put him on as many as we can to get our money's worth, which I didn't mind that. At least I was working.
We will move on to our next one. Bit of a jump. 24 good positive mentions for Conan and Disco Inferno. Good content if they can stay on topic, and Lou Rice Music writes, Conan is pretty good, but they have a ton of ads and answers to fan questions can be a little short. They don't have a filter, or they don't filter a lot of their criticisms, which is really important in a good podcast.
Okay, what does that mean? They don't filter a lot of their criticisms.
Well,
they get criticized on their show?
No, what they're saying is if they're criticising AEW or WWE, they won't have a filter on it. They won't be political like Jim Ross might be. They will be...
Okay.
They will say what is actually on their mind.
Well, there's ways to say things. You don't have to just bury somebody. But this business is very, very actually tough to do. And not everybody is going to agree with the way you do it. We don't agree with the way they do it. But I don't think put them down too badly, except for some interviews.
I mean.
Okay.
Next one, just one positive mention more. Eric Bischoff, with good topics and timekeeping, and Bischoff is good when you want to hear an honest critique of AEW.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever meet Bischoff?
Oh, yeah, a lot. I was around him. I was around him when he was around the clique. He was around the Scott Halls, and I think it was Scott Hall.
No, that was in WCW 96. You weren't there. If you met Eric in the business, it would have been when he was a self-professed third-string announcer in WCW after AEW closed.
No, I was there when he was the head of it. I was there when he was the head of it.
He was in 1993 when he got promoted.
I was there, around there.
You weren't in 93.
Well, where was I in 93?
Oh, don't tell
you
me.
Tell me.
You were in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, I think, in 93.
Yes, I was. And I didn't work there. That's what it is. I went down there to center stage. That's what I did. And he was running it in 93.
I didn't know this. So you used to go to WCW in the early 90s. How come?
Only once. Only one time. I was passing through and I said, well, I have to go down and see these guys. And I went down and introduced myself. First time I ever met him right there. And, but he was in charge of it.
Was this for like the power plant or something, or were you just going to just see the TV?
No, I went to center stage. They're doing TV there. I remember that.
We will move on.
Hey, don't ask me where I've been. I have no idea where in the hell I have been, because I have seriously vast stretches of my wrestling past. It's like just a big vacuum.
Hey, that's what I'm here for, man. That's what I'm here for.
No, I wasn't there. And in 94, I went to Puerto Rico, 94, 95. 96, I went to WWF.
95, I went to WWF.
Right. 95, I did go there. 95, 96.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Puerto Rico in 94. And then it becomes a blur again. And becomes a blur again. Then I went to Puerto Rico a couple of times. And then I went to TNA, and I was there for like 9 years.
Yeah. Next one, a big jump up with 32 likes, Kevin Nash.
Have you listened to his podcast?
No. Have you?
Are you going to listen to it?
No. I haven't got time to listen to podcasts. I make podcasts. That takes up all my time.
Yeah, it does.
No, you've listened to Kevin Nash a bit, haven't you?
Just in the car. Hey, he's hilarious to travel with. He is a funny son of a gun. So he told me one time he got into boxing. And there used to be a boxing promoter in Knoxville, because he played college basketball at the University of Tennessee. And I can't remember this boxing promoter, but he got into boxing, and the guy liked him, and he booked him in a boxing match in Miami Beach.
What?
Yes. And
right.
he drove all the way from Knoxville down through Chattanooga, down through Atlanta, down to Macon, down to Florida. Then he came through Orlando, and then he got on, I think, Interstate 4 it's on the east coast of Florida. No, he got on 95 and went all the way to Miami and had this fight with some Cuban guy that he'd never heard of. He said he won the fight, but that Cuban guy beat the living shit out of him. He said, I don't know how I won the fight. And he says, coming back, now I got to go back. That's like at least 1,000 miles, at least. So he said, I was driving back, and he said, I thought to myself, this is when he got into wrestling. He said, there's got to be an easier way to make a living than boxing. He said, that was my last boxing match. And he says, I went back, and then I found my way into wrestling. But when he's telling that story, oh my God, I was rolling. And I said, what'd you make for the match? He says, not enough. I think he made like $500 or something, and drove and drove 2,000 miles with a swollen eye, almost a broke nose. But he's telling this story, and he was hysterical. He was hilarious when he was telling, and I need to call Kevin. I said, tell me that story again. So you ought to look up Kevin Nash's boxing career and see if it lists that match.
Yeah, did it go for one bout only, or did he actually have quite a few?
I don't think he had but just one match. Said he trained to be a boxer, and this guy that's pretty well known as a promoter out of Knoxville, and they had a champion there, a heavyweight champion that he managed the champion for like, I don't know, not too long, because champion got his butt beat after he won the title quickly. But hilarious story. We should write to him and see if he'll cover that on his podcast.
Or on this podcast, because we probably get views out of it.
Okay, we'll get him here.
That's the spirit. Briefly, his co-host is Sean Oliver. Sean Oliver used to do the U-Shoot and commentaries kind of thing. Any stories with Sean?
Say what now?
Any stories about Sean or just dealings with Sean?
No, I just met him when I did those interviews with him.
All right.
I don't know where he's from. I just did just an interview with him, and he put that on YouTube.
Well, I think a lot of people put it on YouTube. But okay, that was number 2. Kevin Nash with 32 likes. Do you want to have a wild guess at who was the most loved podcast aside from us of people who wrote in?
I'm going to take a guess.
Go on.
Jim Cornette.
Now keep in mind that Kevin Nash came in second with 32. Mm-hmm. Jim Cornette came in first with 178. People speaking positively about him. Great when talking old wrestling, funny, good as long as he's not talking about political stuff or blasting modern wrestling, apparently with the criticisms. But here's a couple of people who wrote in. Mr. Magic said, Cornette's podcast is a blast. Jim is vicious and witty. His knowledge of wrestling history seems pretty much endless, and his obscure boomer references are also a lot of fun. Also, Travis doing the artwork is very, very good at visualizing some of Cornette's ideas. So there you go. Jim Cornette, unsurprisingly, wins the favorite podcast in the wrestling genre.
But you told me that he doesn't do a video podcast like this.
No, audio only.
It's just him. Okay, just him talking.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he is they call Jimmy Hart the mouth of the South. I think Cornette would actually be a close runner-up to Jimmy. He couldn't out-talk Jimmy. But Jim Cornette, he does know a lot about history.
It's because Jimmy Hart doesn't sleep, does he?
I don't think he does. I mean, I used to take Jimmy, of course, he was a manager in Memphis, and he'd get on the apron and we used to do a deal. All of a sudden, he's looking out at the crowd, and he turns around, and I'm there, right? And oh God, and I grab him by the hair. I never will forget this. And I may have said this before. Right before I hit him, he'd always say, "I love you, poo poo." Now, who could hit a guy hard when they just told him, "I love you, poo poo"? But I'll say one thing: Jimmy Hart was very, very fast around that ring. So I chased him one time, and he never thought I could catch him, and I never did. But one time he went around the corner, and it was a little bit slippery, and he lost one step, and then I caught him. But even doing that, he didn't think I could catch him. I only caught him one time, and we were shooting around that ring. We were flying. So, and Jimmy, great manager. Sometimes he would go out to the ring, and I was looking at a card from Louisville. He would manage this guy that would go up against Lawler. Then he'd manage the tag team guys that go up against the tag team champions, and he would manage sometimes 4 or 5 guys. So when he went to Louisville, he was out there at least 75% of the time, and he never lost his heat. See, it's like almost seeing somebody over and over and over, and he had more heat at the end of the night because he was entertaining to watch, and great talker. He was a good guy. He really was.
It was a very touching tribute to Jim Cornette with several Jimmy Hart stories. Still, what else can you say about Jim? We know what's the score is with Jim.